Recently, a video dropped on my feed that had an interesting title, Could L Catch Epstein? With the video in the first second itself being daring enough to declare that L will be able to solve the case in less than 5 minutes. Some of you might have already watched the video and some of you have probably not, but the video is just as the title implies. And if you're not aware already, or this is the first time a video from me is on your page, I made a video just a few weeks ago regarding how a kidda in 2026 would do. And so considering my own video discussing how kidda would act upon the Epstein case, it seemed like something I should watch. The video does admittedly feature great editing on his end, as well as the research when it comes to the Epstein case's details also seems to be spot on. However, I disagree with the outcome as well as the details of how this scenario progresses, and that led to this video, as he believes that in the end, L will be able to catch Epstein. There's also a few misconceptions here and there that I'll clarify as the video progresses, which will only back up my point even further. So let's talk about why, straight to the point, no, L can't catch Epstein. But before that, sub up, as my goal is to hit 25k this month, and join the Discord server to get a chance to talk with me. Also, if you want the full uncut kidda video ad-free, it's on the Patreon, and for $1 you get way more than just that. Podcasts from me and Avent, short analysis videos and essays that may never touch YouTube, and obviously all deleted previous content. So if you enjoy the content we make, the support would be much appreciated. We will try to focus a bit first on debunking the original video in question, and then focusing a bit on my own insight regarding why I think solving the case and catching Epstein will be a bit something that is out of L's own hand despite the power, money, and wisdom he has as a person. So let's first give a bit of insight into the context. The year is 2006, and the scenario takes place around half a year before Light picks up the Death Note. Well, first in the opening seconds of the video, he claims that L will solve the case within just 5 minutes, and that too supposedly being generous. He claims that L stopped World War III when he was just a child, and while that isn't strictly false, it's still a misunderstanding. This claim comes from an alternative timeline of Death Note that was started in the Japanese trilogy, meaning that this would not be something you could claim also holds for the L we know from the anime and manga, which I presume is the one that takes on this case. The 5-minute claim comes from L's failed successor Beyond Birthday, quote-unquote being able to read a book of 376 pages in less than 5 minutes, which is done by ignoring the more logical interpretation that you can conclude after finishing the book. That since Beyond Birthday had prepared for Naomi Musara to appear and planned accordingly, it's much more likely he had already read and memorized the contents of the book beforehand, rather than him just reading 376 pages in less than 5 minutes in front of Naomi. The next claim in this video then becomes that he believes that the director of the FBI will learn that L is attempting to gather information on the Epstein case, which would directly lead to Epstein taking an interest and contacting L by informing him that he's being given a chance to visit the Epstein Island himself. Firstly, let me say that the idea itself of L getting invited to the island is very absurd. Sure, I can buy even Epstein wasn't the brightest man alive or the most cautious man, as we see from his emails and the way he talked about the things he did so casually. But before that, the director of the FBI himself finding out about L researching the case should be downright impossible, unless you're implying that the FBI director has a way to trace or know about what L is doing at that moment, which will be a problem for the later parts of your scenario. L would have to directly feed the information regarding his research as well as interest to the FBI, rather than them finding out instead for it to make logical sense. Let's say that L does that for some unknown reason to see how Epstein will react to knowing that the greatest detective in the world is researching his case. Supposedly, the reason as to why L would actually accept this invitation is that despite him having a moral compass, his desire to win takes priority and that he would accept a challenge like that. Secondly, that he would understand why exactly Epstein invited him on the island according to our original poster. Let's talk about the first reason. It's true that L is someone who has his desire to win as a primary motive behind why he does things, but I wouldn't consider it enough in this case to directly put himself into a situation where, in my opinion, I see L risking more here than the amount he gains. Secondly, my disagreement comes from the fact that I don't think Epstein would invite him at all. Getting back to what I said earlier, it will require some insane suspicion of disbelief that Epstein would think it is a good idea to invite the greatest detective in the world to his island. Epstein really likes control, something that is obvious and even the main characteristic behind how he managed to operate his web of connections for so long, by having control over other people and their actions. The problem here is that L is a man who has no identity, or rather that it is unknown whether L is just a title and that there are people who can inherit it. Perhaps L is not a singular person but a group of people. There's endless possibilities when you try to think of it like that. The true nature of L is what makes it a problem. The anonymous nature behind his existence would be a bigger problem than the detective part. Epstein decided to have someone over on his island that he does not know would be a big problem. It will come down to Epstein trusting a man who has no strings attached to the system, being against what exactly allowed Epstein to control the people who came to the island. Given that the very premise of control is related to the identities and the strings they attach to the system that allows them to be manipulated and controlled. L is not like that. He doesn't have anything to manipulate, control, or strings to be pulled from his political or social standings. Inviting the greatest detective directly to his premises who has no identity attached to himself would be too reckless even for Epstein, given that on paper, it will be one of the biggest problems/threats to someone like him, that even the illusion that L might help him will not be worth it. Inviting someone who, as he knows, will be using a proxy to communicate, rather than even showing up on the island, would compound on how terribly we think Epstein is somehow going to approach this situation, by giving him a direct look at the island itself, which might become a liability in the future for someone he might not be able to control or convince. While yes, as the video itself covers, Epstein was not the greatest at keeping things a shut, but that is still different than directly inviting someone you cannot hold accountable for their actions in the future, not to mention someone you have little affiliation with currently. After this, he continues the video, saying that Epstein states that after Watari arrives on the island, bringing L along through his laptop, where L is actually secretly accompanying Watari as a person who is operating a helicopter that gets them to the island, claiming that Epstein's aim of inviting him to the island would be to get him to agree to a partnership between the two of them, where L could use his intelligence to expand the field of people he controls, becoming someone that controls the world from the shadows, only for them L to not respond and just leave, recording Epstein's words so that he can create a case against him with undeniable evidence later. L would likely not be allowed to firstly be the one who is in control of the helicopter, more likely so being that Epstein's private pilots will be the one who allow Watari to enter and leave the island, with me also failing to see much of the benefit L would get from doing this. To summarize the rest of his scenario, he believes that L, once he has a recording, will go all in on making the truth mainstream, feeding everything to journalists like Julie K. Brown to build a web of flight logs, finances, and photos and releasing it without the biggest names, so it can't be dismissed as a conspiracy. He then sends the full web of the rivals of every compromised official to pressure Epstein's clients into cooperating, and then announces the incriminating final blow as one of his alternative identities, until Epstein's own backers turn him into a scapegoat and he's convicted within a month, with Light later wiping out whoever's left on the list for scenario regarding what I discussed with my video here. Let's come to more so my own belief why I don't think L will catch Epstein. Let's presume that everything went as L intended. I still believe that L would still fail to catch Epstein. Even if we do say that quite literally everything happens as L intends and everything falls into the picture without any problems at all, Epstein could still escape consequences. Is there anything that stops the system itself from protecting what Epstein had large control over, from protecting himself in any way whatsoever that L himself does not hold to ensure that he manages to find a way to without fail capture Epstein under a legal system? The final take of mine is that, let alone before we talk about L catching Epstein, I simply don't believe that L will take on this case if he learned about it in the first place. L's reason for becoming a detective is not a beautiful desire to have some sort of justice that he can change the world. It is a selfish desire to enjoy himself while he has fun enjoying the taste of victory. The problem with this premise is that there needs to be a scope for victory, and that is the biggest problem, because that is not in L's hands, because the system is under his own control. If there is no scope of victory in L's eyes, that the system will bend itself to accommodate in any way whatsoever the survival of certain people, then L's main reason, which is to achieve victory, would just not be present, which takes away the main motive behind L's modus operandi of taking cases. Let's not also pretend that L does or cannot make mistakes. Even if he is the smartest detective in the world, it still leaves room for even small mistakes, which could end up costing him his life, depending on the situation, considering how powerful and influential the authorities we are discussing truly are. He is not omniscient of all danger, of all the possible ways that people in power might try to reach him, as well as not omnipotent enough to be able to find ways to defend himself from all of them. Some of you might say that, well, L took on the killer case, which was a supernatural one, and this one isn't supernatural. And to that, I say there is a difference, because L certainly knew that this case, from the beginning, was not something he could win. On the other hand, he saw from the beginning that the actions of Kira, who claimed to be that of a god, were just those of a childish serial killer who mistook himself as God. L did not have a reason to believe that the case would be unsolvable. Unlike the case we have on our hands here, there's so much more that L knows is out of his hands, as well as out of his control, compared to the unknown when it is about the Kira case. Sure, if we do presume Light gets a death note at around the original canon time, then he certainly take care of the rest of the men in that list. But even then, the real people sitting behind the web would still be safe. And in the end, the only one who got burned was a scapegoat they framed for it all. If you want to do the cop-out scenario in this, then yeah, sure, Light gets a death note in 2006 and he wipes out the Epstein list. But I don't believe that says much regarding L's own ability. People more important or bigger than Epstein himself, as he was just part of the circle of people, many similar and many surely even worse people than him. The problem will not just be solved if we find a way to deal with Epstein himself. Hell, it will be in their interest that someone like Epstein becomes a sacrificial lamb for all of them. What exactly is L supposed to do against the most powerful man of the planet, whose identity even he has no information about at all? L, in the end, is a detective like I said. He's not a god who can do everything, to even alter the system that the world operates on. They have the ability to influence, control, and manipulate so many things on large scale that L himself cannot even do with his status as a billionaire. With all of them working together, it makes it nigh impossible for L to be able to do anything to them under the hands of the system they control. In the end, I believe that L would not have an interest in any victory against someone who is just a scapegoat for the people who are, in a way, truly untouchable, and would just use Epstein as a way to do that. L would know this, and even if he did somehow truly find a way to definitively catch Epstein, barely create a miracle, and make the system work against him, it will never end up as his victory, because the true culprits are still behind it all and will not be caught by him, ultimately removing the desire behind why L takes cases. Once again, I have no personal dislike towards the original creator himself. I'm sure it took him a long time to create the video, so I really do recommend showing him support as well as watching the original video to get more insight on how he believes the situation would occur. I'll link the video down in the description to ensure to show him support. If you believe my critiques as well as disagreements are invalid or incoherent in any way, then please do drop a comment in the comment section below as I read the comments that most people would think.